Today, I will discuss price ceilings and floors, emphasizing effective methods for students to differentiate between them. This is standard SSEMI 2G. Equilibrium price is sometimes called the market clearing price because the market is cleared a product at that price. Everyone who is willing and able to pay for the product gets the product. That is, quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. All sellers willing to sell at that price are able to sell. The product has been efficiently allocated. That is, provided to those who most desire it. Price rationed the product by ensuring that those who were willing and able got their product. Have students fold a sheet of notebook paper hamburger. An example is on the next slide. This picture of student work goes beyond the topics in the Georgia Standards of Excellence for Economics. This is an example of how the hamburger sheet would look for the GSE standard when it is completed. I mimic their paper on my whiteboard and draw the dotted line down the middle. I then do all price ceilings notes and examples on the left side, then price floors on the right side. At the end, this will serve as a quick study guide that also compares and contrasts these two price controls. Place students into small groups and have them brainstorm a list of products whose prices are too high. Have each group make a list. Circulate as they brainstorm and provide assistance as needed. This is a think, pair, share as described by Merrill Herman. Now, as a whole group, have each group report their top item. Then, immediately without discussion, go to the next group and their top item. It is okay to repeat. They don't have to say, "You stole mine," because you can see their lists. Keep hearing from all groups until you've exhausted their answers. This is a whip around, as described by Merrill Herman. Now, have each group consider their answers and that of other groups. Which of the products would they like to have the government step in and regulate the price? Again, have them brainstorm, but for a shorter period of time. Now draw a nice neat graph on the left side of the board, leaving room to write below the graph, and instruct them to do the same. Show equilibrium price and quantity. Make the market the product that they choose to regulate. I chose to graph generic college tuition, that is, your local state university, because seniors often complain about the price. I have a student look up how much tuition is for one semester, and I write that number in as the price. Then I ask them, what is the problem with this price? They should say it is too high. Next, ask where the new regulated price should be set in order to help college students. They should say that the new price has to be lower in order to help more students afford college. Now, draw in a different color the price control. Do not say ceiling yet. Have students do their dot dots to indicate the appropriate QS and QD. Emphasize that we are no longer at equilibrium. Ask students, what will the market forces try to do to the price? They should say that market forces will try to drive the price up or increase it. Show this on your graph as indicated by the green arrows. Then I tell students to imagine that they are price and they are at the bottom of the demand curve. Price wants to rise, I say, as I stand on a desk or chair near the wall for safety, and I extend my arms upward towards the ceiling. As you reach up, ask students what stops the price from increasing as you put your palms on the ceiling or near there, depending on your height. Perhaps use a doorway. Your hands are stopped by the ceiling. Then go back to the graph and point to the green arrows. Ask students, what stops the price? They should say the ceiling. Now label your price control as the price ceiling. Ask students if resources are allocated the way society wants. Provide a hint if they need it by adding, does everyone who is willing to pay get the market good or service? No, they don't. because quantity supplied is less than quantity demanded. So our ceiling caused a shortage. The amount of the shortage is shown by the double-headed green arrow. The ceiling interferes with efficient allocation of the product. Because many more consumers want the product, but only a small number of landlords are willing to rent, this is shown by the quantity supplied in green on the graph, some other allocation method will be required to determine who will get the product. In second grade, methods of allocation are taught. I copied the standard here for your convenience. I transitioned to a discussion of a real-world price ceiling, rent control in New York City. I explained how we could decide who gets a vacant apartment using a variation of the activity in price controls, too low or too high. I ask for a volunteer and tell them they own an apartment building in New York City. I illustrate the pros and cons, that is, winners and losers, of several allocation methods. I tell them I'm a teacher in New York City trying to get an apartment. If the landlord uses first come, first served, how will I ever get an apartment? I will have to take the day off of work to try, and I may not be successful. My cost was my time and taking days off from work without any results. A random drawing could select someone who just moved to New York City, and I've been sleeping on a friend's couch for 3 months. Who do you know? Or personal connections is another alternative. I make sure students realize that each method of allocation has drawbacks when evaluated based on some of the social goals of an economy: efficiency, equity, and freedom, SSEF 4B. Now, I get the whole class involved. I tell them they need an apartment, and there's only one which our landlord has to rent. I ask them how they will get the apartment. Bribery is soon mentioned. I explain that the $100 handshake is against the city laws. Yes, there are laws to regulate this. Rent control causes enforcement to be needed, which is a cost for the city. Last, we talk about incentives. Your air conditioner breaks. Does the landlord install a brand new unit or just patch it? There are better ways to provide housing assistance without so many negative externalities. Perhaps ask the students for a better way. Many cities have stopped rent controls and now directly subsidize individuals who need help in paying. What was the number of people who could find apartments before the rent control? Q. After rent control, how many can find an apartment? QS. So the difference between these quantities, indicated by the red arrow, represents the number who now cannot find an apartment to rent. They may end up living with friends, parents, hotels, etc. The difference represents sales not made in this market, lost transactions. Now, price floors. Remind students that the demand for labor comes from producers. Businesses hire workers because the business anticipates making a profit from selling the goods or services that the workers produce. This is derived demand. The demand for workers depends upon the demand for the final good or service. I tell students the supply of workers comes from you and me, that is, households. We own the factors of production and choose whether or not to work. Most of us have to work in order to have the things we like, such as food, housing, car, etc. We earn income in exchange for our work or labor. I make the market unskilled labor and use minimum wage as an example of the price floor. Draw this graph about the same size as your price ceiling one, which is still on the left side of your whiteboard. Again, leave room to write below the graph and ask students to now take notes on the right-hand side of their hamburger paper. Ask students what would the equilibrium wage be for unskilled labor if we did not have a minimum wage. Explain that unskilled labor is exactly that, workers who have not received specialized training. Yard work is an example students will understand, or babysitting without the specialized training of CPR, diabetes care, and/or general first aid certification. Students should say that the equilibrium wage will be less than minimum wage. Then I ask them, what is the problem with the equilibrium price? Point to the equilibrium price indicated by P on the graph. They should say it's too low. Explain that the government will establish a price control that is a minimum that must be paid in order to help producers stay in business. Remind students that workers are producers of labor. Tell students that agricultural products may also have price controls because the equilibrium price may not be high enough to keep the farmer in business. Next, ask where the new regulated price should be set in order to help producers. They should say that the new price has to be higher in order to help producers. The price control will be placed above equilibrium wage or price. Draw in a different color the price control on the graph. Do not say floor yet. Have students do their dot dots to indicate the appropriate QS and QD. Emphasize that we're no longer at equilibrium. Since QS is greater than QD at the price control price, ask students what will the market forces try to do to the price. They should say that market forces will try to drive the price down or decrease it. Show this on your graph as indicated by the green arrows. Then I tell students to imagine that they are price, and they are at the top of the demand curve. Price wants to fall. I say this as I start to kneel down and I extend my arms downward towards the floor. As you reach down, ask students what stops the price from decreasing as you put your palms down near the floor. Your hands are stopped by the floor. Then go back to the graph and point to the green arrows. Ask students what stops the price. They should say the floor. Now label your price control as the price floor. Ask students if resources are allocated the way society wants. Provide a hint if they need it by adding, does everyone who is willing to work or produce at the price floor price get the price floor price? No, because quantity demanded is less than quantity supplied. So our floor caused a surplus. The amount of the surplus is shown by the double-headed green arrow. Floors are intended to help producers. Do they? Well, some are helped. Others not so much, as they may see their hours cut or be replaced by machines. Only exception to this is if businesses can raise the price of the final good or service that the workers are producing and consumers still buy it. Then, businesses are more likely to maintain their current workforce. But many of the items that unskilled workers produce are not ones that consumers will pay more for, so tough choices must be made for businesses to avoid closing their doors. How many workers who were hired before the price floor are now not hired? Compare the quantity at equilibrium to the quantity demanded of the price floor. This is in green on the graph. The workers who will not be hired at the higher wage are shown by the red arrow. Remember the allocation that is achieved at price equilibrium? Just remind students that you only get this when QS is equal to QD. Discuss the cost of lost efficiencies with students. That is, the cost of price floors. I provide some historical examples. The image is from the 1950s dairy price supports. These have been around for a long time in varying levels. With price floors, since there is a surplus, allocation methods are not necessary. The market willingness to buy is now the limit of the market at the price floor price. Since the government had a price floor above equilibrium for these markets, consumers reduced their quantity demanded. Law of demand at work. The government entered the market and purchased the surplus quantities at the price floor price. The government became the buyer of last resort. But the government could not sell the surplus products without damaging the market. Therefore, the government distributed these products to schools and low-income individuals. Payments for storage and product spoilage increased the inefficiencies of these programs. With the government buying the surpluses, producers had no incentive to reduce production. The law of supply. Selling overseas could be an option, but would be met by hostility, since price dumping is illegal under the World Trade Organization. If price controls cause externalities, students will ask why governments implement them. Federal, state, and local have all used them. I explain that real-world situations cause individuals to ask for help from their government officials. Market shocks often cause this. The consequences are important. In the short run, price controls help, but cause externalities which in the long run cause additional problems. Higher price floor prices end up being passed on to consumers as we pay a higher price. If an agricultural subsidy is used, consumers often pay higher taxes, or society faces increased deficit spending. After I do this lesson, I summarize again, reviewing with students the content on their hamburger sheet. I ask whether price ceilings really do help consumers. Those that are able to get the product are helped, but others are not. How can society help them? Do price floors help firms stay in business? Some firms stay in business, others may not. Both ceilings and floors generate other costs to society. Any ceiling placed above price equilibrium will have no impact on the market at all. The reason? Price ceilings are maximums. The market price will rise to the equilibrium price and go no further. A price floor placed below equilibrium price also has no impact. These are called non-binding price controls. Here are the sources. Professor Harmon's book has many excellent teaching strategies. Happy teaching. Remind students that graphs tell these stories. Economics is more than points on a curve. Those points represent buyers and sellers trying to earn a living.